Bam. We are live. It is week 1. John, we have made it. John's thumb making the appearance. We have made it to week 1. It is the NFL season in something like, 56 hours or something like that. We will be watching real live NFL football that matters, that counts in the standings, and will be recorded for all of history. And we got some Dallas Cowboys 2024 season predictions to get through. John, how's it going? I'll say it this way. How is PFF 56 hours before the start of the NFL regular season?
Oh man, it's crazy. It's wild here. Things flying left and right, but really happy I got to make time to do this, twice a week. So really excited. The crazy thing is up until it was really busy leading up until Monday because of all the fantasy drafts. I kind of my editing, I edit most of the fantasy stuff. So like Nathan Yonke, John Macri, Nick Bodyford, all of those fellas. I usually edit all that stuff. So it's been a madhouse the last few days, because Labor Day is the biggest day for fantasy football drafts of the year. So getting all the content ready. I think we had Nathan Yonke was writing something like 8 articles a day or something like that in the lead up to this. Just insane amount of volume of work. So I'm been knee deep in fantasy football stuff. Feels like the last millennia.
There you go. Well, that is awesome. I'm in 2 fantasy leagues. Both of them are like Cowboys, media, Twitter people related, and both of them are just like. And I don't know if it's we talked a lot about kind of the feelings around the team in the off season, the lack of excitement, and kind of the apathy and all that other kind of stuff. And part of me wonders if that's kind of bleeding over to us. We haven't done our drafts for the year yet. We're dynasty, so we're doing just rookie drafts. We could have done them in May or something like that, and we're kind of everybody's kind of dragging, trying to figure out when we're going to draft and all that kind of stuff. But we're going to get those in the next. I think one of them is tonight, actually. So
yeah. Don't tell anybody. Don't tell my bosses. But I haven't played fantasy football in like a decade.
You and Landon McCool are like the only 2 people that I know that like just play no fantasy football at all.
Here's my little tangent. We'll go on a little tangent since we don't have a recap. Not a ton really going on before week 1, but I feel like because I've been working in football full time since I was about 23, 24 years old. For some of that time, I was also teaching jiu-jitsu for a good portion of that. But I have found that when I really dive into football and like make it my world, listen to all the podcasts, play fantasy, read every article I can read, listen to every podcast, I get burnt out multiple times in a season so fast, and it becomes like it gets kind of miserable throughout the process. There's always like a good 3 or 4 week chunk during the season where I'm just like dragging, just like, again and again. It's like, Groundhog's Day, doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over. It gets kind of monotonous. But what I've done, especially I started doing it this off season, and it's made a load of difference, is basically when I'm not working, I'm not like paying attention to football really that much. When I'm working at PFF, yes, I'm reading all the articles, I'm listening to podcasts, all of that. But on my free time, where I still used to doing all the football podcasts, Talking Cowboys, then Move the Sticks podcast, and then the Athletic Football podcast, and all of that. Can't do it anymore. So now I've been supplementing it with like a lot of like MMA, a lot of wrestling podcasts, I actually listen, like my favorite podcasts right now are NBA podcasts that I listen to. And that has made a world of difference. Now every day when I get up to do football stuff, I'm not like dragging. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm excited to watch this week's film. I'm excited to do this. So I'm hoping doing that this season is going to allow me to, have a more seamless stretch throughout the football season where I don't hit those couple of times where I just start dragging throughout the season. So I think it's good. It's good to have other hobbies in your life for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm sort of similar, and I don't work full time in football, But I've gone through phases where it feels like my entire podcast feed is just full of 3 or 4 different football shows every day. On top of doing this show or doing other shows in the past or writing or whatever. And I've gotten to the point where I listen to the Locked On show with Landon and Marcus.
Oh yeah, of course.
Every day, have been for since the beginning. I listen to the Athletic Football Show because I feel like that's like a level of football discourse that you don't get very much on the internet.
Nate Teich isn't at Athletic anymore, is he? He's
no, he left.
Now, right?
Yeah, he left in like
And
May.
ESPN.
Yeah, and went to Yahoo and now NFL Network.
Oh yeah, NFL
yeah.
Network.
And so it's funny. I discovered, this house that I'm in right now. It took us like 2 years to build it. Way too long. Long story. Anyway, I discovered the Athletic Football Show around the time we started building this house, and I did a lot of the work here myself. And so I was here with AirPods in my head for multiple hours a day, pretty much every day for 2 years. And Nate and Robert were in my ear pretty much almost every day through that entire process. And then we finished the house and we moved in May, and then Nate left. So it was like this whole end of an era of my life, like of all of these 2 friends that felt like walked with me through this process through a couple of NFL seasons. And then he left right as we moved in. It was kind of a cool symmetry, but I've gotten where I do those 2 shows, and I watch a pretty decent amount of what JT O'Sullivan puts out. Oh, yeah. And then every once in a while, if I've got time, I'm working or whatever, I'll throw, Sky Steele or Bosch Lombardi or somebody like that that's on YouTube that does really great content on YouTube. I'll put those guys up and watch those while I work. But for the most part, if most of the time I'm not listening to football podcasts when I'm not in kind of work mode. When I'm outside of work mode, I'm not listening. I'm not doing very much football because I just I'm like you. I'll get burnt out in like week 7, and from week 7 to 11 will just be a grind, and then it gets to the end of the year, and you get through Thanksgiving, and things get exciting. But
it's gone to the point too where like even more like even when you get into the like dilute it down to the Cowboys stuff. When I'm listening to like my national podcast, like everybody knows I'm a huge fan of like Bomani Jones. I also think Nick Wright's hilarious, and I love like his kind of shtick. So I'll listen to his podcast with his son, and I think those are really interesting. But when they talk about the Cowboys, I hit that skip button, man. I listen and talk about the Cowboys all day, every day, and I know that they're going to talk about something because they're national guys. They're going to say something where it's just going to annoy me. And I'm just going to be like, that's not right. That's not what's going on. It's like you're missing out X, Y, and Z details and just get frustrated. Now I'm just like, skip. All right, let's listen to the next team. Let's go.
It's funny though, because you do that about the Cowboys, and I'll do that about the Cowboys on some shows. But you think about it, then you also listen to those people talk about other teams and assume that they're incorporating all that in with the other teams, but that they're not doing it with the Cowboys. And so it's funny with those national type shows like that when they like, this is not the Athletic Football Show praise show, but they go through all 32 teams and like crazy level of details in their preview shows and season recaps and all that kind of stuff. So they're like deep in some of this stuff. And so I know if they're talking about the Cowboys, they've got a lot of context to it. But some of these other shows, I know they're talking about the Cowboys, and I hear how they talk about the Cowboys, and I'm like, that's how they talk about Dallas. So when they talk about Seattle, how much do they really know about what's going on with the Seahawks? If I know they don't know what's going on with the Cowboys, do they know what's going on with the Seahawks or the Rams or the Commanders? Probably not there either. But, that is what it is. That's why we focus on the Dallas Cowboys, is because
it's one of those things you got to evaluate the evaluator, kind of like things that they're good at. Like Nick Wright, I'm not going to listen to him talk about like offense and defensive line, trench warfare, or like matchups, but like betting, he's really big in the betting. So I'll listen to the betting stuff, and it's like, okay, that's intriguing. Like you'll get like reasoning for why like do certain things. Like Bomani Jones, he's not going to give you X's and O's or stuff, but he's going to be really fun and really, I think, provide a lot of insight into like the storylines surrounding teams, how those things kind of intertwine with each other, and how, things are progressing and deprogressing, and how using like history as the biggest projector of the future, stuff like that. So you just got to know what you're listening to, know what their strengths and weaknesses are. And like like Joey was saying, there's only I'm dead ass serious, maybe 5, analysts in the whole in the whole wide scope of the interwebs that can like evaluate all 32 teams and do a really good job. It's just something that's incredibly difficult to stay up on all 32 teams and to watch all the games. That's another big one that people don't think about is you have to watch all of these games to be able to keep up with these teams. And when you have guys that are doing, 6 shows, all these different things, when are they going to have time to watch that? They're just getting, notes from research, all of these type of things and basing their opinions off those. And for guys like us that are really knee deep into this Cowboys and to all this stuff, that's just not going to cut it because we're going to see all the holes that are made from when your analysis comes from that.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned with Nick Wright is awesome with betting stuff. I'm not a gambler. I don't know, John, if you are.
Not really.
I don't bet on sports. I don't bet on stuff like that. But I will say,
frugal.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Cowboys' 2024 regular season. The over/under in most places. I'm looking at Vegas Insider right now. They've got several different sports books and what the over/under currently is. It's at everywhere except for DraftKings, I believe. I'm having to scroll up and down here because the functionality is not great. Yeah, everywhere except for DraftKings has the Cowboys at over/under 9.5 wins. So, John, plant your flag right now. Put it in the ground. Over/under 2024 Dallas Cowboys 9.5 wins. And I will say, just so that we can toe the company line for you a little bit here, according to the PFF simulation model, they are projecting the Cowboys at 9.6 wins with a strength of the 16th ranked strength of schedule. So right smack dab in the middle on the strength of schedule range.
Well, far be it for me to disagree with our wonderful data team and research team over at PFF, but I think it's an easy over, to be honest. As long as you have Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and Micah Parsons on your team, I think, and you don't get hit with a significant string of injuries, I'm thinking double-digit wins is the baseline for this type of team. We talk about how frustrating their offseason was for a majority of the fan base, how they didn't make the acquisitions necessary to really improve the roster based on last year. But I think that is the type of thing where those issues will come more in the playoffs. I don't think it's something that's going to be necessarily a regular season problem. I think the Cowboys in the regular season are still going to be the same type of, quote juggernaut, really what we've seen the last 3 years, 12 wins each of the last 3 years. Very impressive. And I think the fact that they don't need to hit that 12 mark, they just need to hit 10. I think that's an easy over for me, especially you look at the schedule, especially coming down the stretch. I think they end the season with 4 out of 5 games at home. So that can get them a little momentum going into the playoffs, So I don't know about you, but I think this easy over. Dak Prescott, one of the best quarterbacks in the league, second in the MVP voting last year. Like we've said, the losses in the running game, running backs don't really matter that much, so I don't think that's going to inhibit their ability to win very often. The receiving core, I think the loss of Michael Gallup might ultimately be a improvement because you're not going to have Dak forcing him balls all the time into crowded coverage. He's going to more take what's open to him, or maybe feed it more to CeeDee Lamb. That sounds like something that's fun. I think that the tight end group is going to be a lot better. I think Jake Ferguson is going to take a significant step forward. I think Luke Schoonmaker is going to be good. I think John Stevens Jr. is going to add a little bit of a wrinkle to the passing game as a big-bodied seam threat and red zone weapon. The defense, we've been talking about Mike Zimmer, about that scheme, about how it might start a little bit slow to start the season, but it's going to get ramped up. And by mid-season to the end of the season, I think they're going to be, as long as, injuries and all of that, I think they're really going to be playing their best ball and really be playing at like a top 10, top 5 defense in the NFL type of level once the season is towards that latter third. So I'm really, especially for the regular season, I'm really bullish on what the Cowboys are going to do.
Yeah, I mean, let's look at it this way. Dak Prescott became the Cowboys quarterback in 2016. The Cowboys win totals since 2016, 13 wins in 2016, 9 in 2017, with everything that was going on with that roster, and will Zeke be suspended? Will he won't be suspended? Tyron Smith gets hurt. They just decide to feed Dak Prescott to Chaz Green and feed Chaz Green to the Wolves in Atlanta, and everything that came out of that. 10 wins in 2018, 8 in 2019, the year that that was such a weird year, and they were the number one offense in the league. The number one offense in the league, middle of the road defense. They were one of the best point differential teams in the league and wound up going 8-8. Very, very weird year. They had a point differential of positive 113 that year. They went 8-8. In 2016, when they won 13 games, the point differential was only 115 positive. So they were a much better than an 8-8 team. Just a lot of weird things happened that year to keep them from being 8-8. Dak gets hurt early in the year. They go 6-10 in 2020, and then they go 12-5, 12-5, 12-5. So what that tells you is that if Dak Prescott is in the lineup, what that means is they're going to win 10 games, 11 games, somewhere in that neighborhood. There was a 10.5 win total at DraftKings. I want to say a lot of the places started with 10.5 as the win total for the Cowboys. I think that's the right number. I think the number is 10 to 11 wins for this team if everything goes right. If Jalen Tolbert takes a huge step. If Tyler Guyton and Cooper Beebe are amazing in the offensive line. If you get, if Kalen Carson comes in and is Deron Bland 2.0 starting at center, they could win 13, 14 games because you have a great quarterback. You have a great quarterback. You have one of the best wide receivers in football, and you've got a defensive pass rusher that can get you 5, 6, 7 sacks or 5, 6, 7 pressures a game with 1 or 2 sacks pretty much in every game. That is going to get you exactly what you're looking for. If you get that upside from those support players, which that's really the risk with this team this year from my point of view, is that they don't have the Dante Fowler that is just going to line up and get you 6 or 7 sacks and a bunch of pressures and eat up a bunch of snaps. Carl Lawson, they put him back in the right jersey number. Maybe the hustle number will come up there, and that's a big help. The help they added on the interior of the defensive line is a big help. But there's just a lot of questions around the middle percentile of this roster. The top end of the roster is really great. I don't feel like they have problems with anybody who's going to play meaningful snaps that we know is bad, right? It's not like Brock Hoffman is your starting center, right? Where you know, okay, this guy is a problem if he's your starter. I don't necessarily know that there's any of those. Maybe on the defensive line and the interior, Mozzie's going to have some struggles because of where he is in his recovery process and in his career and all that. But you've kind of backstopped that. You don't have anybody that you look at and go, that guy for sure is going to be a problem. But there's a lot of guys you look at and go, that guy may not be a plus player right now. And there's a couple of spots that you don't know for sure whether they're going to be problems or not. And like you said, a lot of that stuff doesn't come up and doesn't show up until December, January, when you look around and say, all right, now it's playoff time and you're playing against really good teams every week. And you're playing against a Kyle Shanahan offensive coordinator who's going to find that third corner that you really don't want to be on the field, but he has to be because you got an injury. And he's just going to pick him apart. He's going to, he's going to where's Waldo him all day, and he's going to find him, and you're going to be in the Shanna cannon or the Shanna scope or something like that, and you're going to get roasted all day. That's the next question that this team has to answer. For me, this is an over 9.5 win team all day, assuming that your quarterback is healthy. And probably, I think you put CeeDee Lamb in that same class of as long as CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott are healthy, they're a 10, 11 win team. If one of those two guys goes down, if Dak goes down, they're probably a 5, 6 win team. If CD goes down, they're probably a 8, 9 win team. I think those two guys are worth that much value. So yeah, I think we're both pretty solidly over the 9.5 wins. John, if you had to pick one player on your roster, on the Dallas Cowboys roster, to be your breakout player for the 2024 season, who you got as your breakout player?
Ooh, this one's tough because I have one on the offense and defense that I think really,
Okay,
really
we can
deserves.
pick one offense and one
Okay,
defense. I like
okay,
it.
okay, okay. I'll go with offense first, and I already mentioned him, but Jake Ferguson, I think, is going to have a breakout year. I think for my fantasy bros out there, I think this is going to be the year that he breaks into like that kind of tier one of fantasy production. I think he's going to, especially with Michael Gallup out, I think Dak is going to rely heavily on Jake Ferguson. We've seen in the
Mhm.
past how heavily he relies on tight ends in general. And I think with one more weapon that he's lost that he's comfortable with, I think he's going to rely even more on the guys that he's has familiarity with, like Jake Ferguson. I think Ferguson is someone whose route running is improving, but he's already shown a really, really good ability to find soft spots in between zones. He has reliable hands on those short to intermediate passes. We still want to see him get a little bit better snagging in those big seam balls, those big deep balls, those contested catches that are while he's getting hit. Those are the ones where last year he had a little bit of trouble hauling in, but the short to intermediate stuff, I think that he was fantastic there. I think he's a good blocker. I think he's only going to keep improving there. I think he's going to be a big red zone weapon. I think he's going to be a big weapon every year. I'm expecting a really big year out of Jake Ferguson. He's a guy who I've been a big fan of, even dating back to his college days. I was probably one of the higher people on him coming out. And I was one of the only people after his first year who said that he should be the starter with Schultz out. A lot of people were trying to push, Schoonmaker into there, Peyton Hendershot into there. But in my opinion, Ferg's been the guy since he got here. So I think he's going to be fantastic. I think that I really like to see, too, that he has been attending those tight end university or tight end whatever
Tight
things
end you, yep.
with Kittle and Travis Kelsey and all of them. And I think those are the types of places where you can pick up on those little details that can kind of take your game to the next level, can kind of improve his ability to create separation against man coverage, those type of things that can take him from a guy who's kind of in that about tier 2 to tier 3 tight end level who, like I said, gets open against zone into a guy who, is really scheme diverse. He can get open against man and zone coverage. He can be effective in any situation and any part of the field. So really excited about what Ferg's going to bring on offense. I think he's going to be the breakout guy. And on defense, this is not that hot of a take, but given his early season role, might be a little bit of a hot take because I don't think he's going to necessarily start right away. And that's DeMarvion Overshown. I think he is going to have a really fantastic year. Number one, improved interior defensive line for the Cowboys is going to allow him more room to roam, because he's a guy who plays sideline to sideline. He's very frenetic. He's very energetic. He probably fills the hole harder and faster than any other linebacker the Cowboys have on the roster. He's also pretty good in pass coverage because he's played safety initially in college. So he has those skills. And I wouldn't be surprised if he takes over for Damone Clark
Yep.
uh, for Damone Clark, starting at that will linebacker spot next to Eric Kendrick. So I think DeMarvion Overshown is going to be the future of this linebacking corps. Every opportunity that he's had, he's impressed me, whether it was in the preseason last year, in training camp last year, in training camp this year, he was definitely impressive. Preseason, he was impressive. The only thing with him is he can't get hurt. And we've already seen things kind of click up, whether it's last year he lost a season and then during training camp he's had to miss little stints because he had little nicks and bruises as well. So I hope if he can stay healthy, I think he's going to have a really fantastic year and really break out in the linebacker core in the NFL. He's going to be one of those young up and coming linebackers that everybody is going to be loving. Next year I wouldn't be surprised if next offseason you see all like the film nerds like Ben Solak, Nate Tice being like, oh, DeMarvion Overshown. Love watching him play, watch him make this run fit, watch him make this fill. And like I said, with everything, it all ties together with the interior defensive line being improved. If they're not improved, then it's going to be struggle bus city for the second level. But I think they will be improved, and I think that would allow Overshown to have a big year.
Yeah, I think we're going to see Overshown do some really cool things in coverage, and a lot of people are going to say, "Did you know DeMarvion Overshown played safety in college?" And it's going to be the new,
New
Lyle
Lyle
Collins played
Collins.
tackle in college. So yeah, I think those are great choices on both sides of the ball. And it kind of leaves it doesn't leave a whole lot of meat on the bone on the offensive side because most of the offensive side of the ball is pretty proven, especially from a skill player standpoint. And it's hard to take the rookie left tackle as the breakout player of the year.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to take Jalen Tolbert, man.
Ooh.
Let me say this. I'll take him in another one. I think it's Jalen Tolbert, where I think he just, what is a number 3 wide receiver in an offense where your number 1 wide receiver is getting like 180 or 200 targets? It's probably like a 20 or 30 catch, 350, 400 yard season for him would be like a pretty decent season, especially if that's, 4 or 5 touchdowns involved there. I think we see Jalen Tolbert make some really important plays as teams try to account for CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks and Jake Ferguson, like you talked about. And they don't really necessarily probably aren't going to account for the Cowboys run game numbers wise, especially early in the season. But if this offensive line gets rolling, it won't matter who's carrying the ball. They'll be able to go. So I think that is like I said, 35 catches, 400 yards, somewhere around 10 yards per reception with, 4 or 5 touchdowns for Jalen Tolbert. I think it would be an awesome season. And it would fit right there in that realm of, I think Jake Ferguson picks up some of the volume that goes away with Micah Parsons. With Michael Gallup being gone, and I think some of that gets picked up by Jalen Tolbert, and I think he's in position for a really good season, because one thing that we know is that if you play wide receiver for Dak Prescott and you play a lot of snaps, you're going to catch footballs and you're going to produce, because for some reason all the guy does is get wide receivers paid a lot of money. So. He saved Randall Cobb's career in 2018, and he was still in the league for 4 more years or something like that after everybody thought he'd been done for 2 years. But all right, that was my offensive guy. My defensive guy, oh man, I should have thought about these ahead of time when I was thinking about what I was going to ask you, was who I was going to name. I think the easy one is Kalen Carson, and that's just because of the opportunity he's going to have. And he's going to have he's going to be on the field early. He's going to be on the field a lot.
He's going to get a lot of targets.
Yes, and they're going to throw the ball at him a ton, because if it comes down to, hey, I can line my number 1 wide receiver up against Trayvon Diggs, or I can line him up against Kalen Carson, I'm going to put him on Kalen Carson, and I'm going to try to pepper targets over there. I'm going to carpet bomb that side of the ball. So I'm very confident that he's going to have the opportunity. And from everything that we've seen so far, there hasn't been an opportunity that he's had that he hasn't met. And with number 21 on his chest and on his back, so much better than 41. Thank goodness for the roster cut downs and the number changes that come with it.
Thank you.
Thank goodness.
He saved us from so many.
So many. Caitlin Carson, Carl Lawson, you name it. We are in position for these guys to have opportunities. And so far, just like pretty much everybody else in this rookie class, every opportunity that he's gotten, he's lived up to and stepped up to. So I think Kalen Carson's going to at least have the opportunity to be the guy. And if I can't take Overshown, then I'm going to take Kalen Carson. And I think he'll have like 2 or 3 picks in the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season. And then Deron Bland will be coming back, and we'll be talking about like, holy cow, this team is so, all that kind of stuff. So like, this team is so deep at corner. Look at how did they do it again? All this other kind of stuff. Well, when Deron Bland gets ready to come back. So we have our breakout players. We have our overall season prediction. We'll zoom out a little bit and look at the NFC East as a whole, right? So where do you see the Cowboys fitting in the NFC East? Maybe let's go through the NFC East a little bit, high level, team by team. The Eagles finished second in the division last year. They had a massive collapse in the second half of the season, but I don't remember where you stood on this. Basically, the whole first half of their year, I was sitting there trying to tell people that the Eagles were fake.
Oh
Like
yeah,
that,
my whole thing was that the regression to the mean was coming. I had a big
it was going to
tweet that
be.
was that Eagles fans jumped on the
Yes.
middle of the year, like, oh wait, and then by the end of the year, oh they stopped commenting on it. It was weird.
Yeah, because all of their wins were these one score, crazy, fluky, stupid wins. And what happens in the moment is you hear people come up and say, oh, this is a clutch team that comes
Yeah,
through. They know how to win one score games. And what we know is that you get a big enough sample and those things don't exist.
yeah. Unless
The
you're the Peyton Manning Colts back in the '90s. Or was it in the early 2000s?
Yeah, it
That's
would
the
have been
only
early
team that's
2000s. Yeah.
performed consistently above expectation when it comes to the point differential
Yes. So
and one score games.
yes, good teams don't win one score games. Good teams don't play one score games. That's how you judge whether a team is good. Is are they winning by 10? Are they winning by 13, 14, 20 in a game? That's how you know. Even if occasionally they get blown out too because they just don't have it that day, it happens. You play 18 of these things. By the time you get in the playoffs, you play 17 in the regular season. Some days you're going to show up, you're not going to have it. But if the Eagles were not they were not as good early in the season as their record showed early. I also think they probably aren't necessarily as bad as their second half of the season looked, but the vibes in Philly are not great right now, and
Especially between Hurts and
they're
old Sirianni.
exactly. And they decided to hire Kellen Moore, who's a complete deviation from what they've been doing on offense. So what the Eagles do schematically on offense is so much different than what most of the rest of the league is doing that they decided to make a big pivot back to sort of mainstream offense with a quarterback that I don't know about you. I don't know that he's necessarily the quarterback I would want to put in kind of a mainstream NFL
I think
offense.
they honestly had the best offense for him the last couple of
Exactly. It
years.
was it was tailor made for him, and it still didn't work. Once the play caller left, once Shane Steichen left, they still couldn't make it work.
Mm-hmm.
And so now they add Kellen Moore. Who knows what that offense is going to look like? And then you hire Vic Fangio, who big picture meta of like this is or was for a long time the direction the NFL defenses are going. Do we? But when he left Miami,
They
it
were
was
all
like
the
it
defenders
was
were all
like
happy. They
there
were all
were
like, "Thank
parties in
you."
the streets of Miami when he left with players because they were so excited that Vic Fangio wasn't going to be their defensive coordinator anymore. And these are the same guys that a couple of years ago played, for a guy that their quarterback was talking about how much he like just ripped into them every day and how he told them they were terrible all the time. And they were celebrating when Vic Fangio left, and they were mad when
Yeah.
so I don't know that the steps the Eagles took are the steps that would fix the problems. But one thing you got to give them credit for, Howie is going to do everything he can to improve his roster, right?
Mm-hmm.
He made a bunch of moves. They traded Hassan Reddick before the Hassan Reddick thing blew up in their face. They replaced him with a guy who's a similar style of player. Defensive backs, they're never going to run into that defensive back problem they ran into last year again. They signed Saquon Barkley. Will that matter? Probably not, but it'll be something people will talk about. That's Philly. Then Washington hires Dan Quinn, drafts Jaden Daniels, hires Cliff Kingsbury, which is kind of an interesting call to me. I don't know that I get that one. New GM, things look like they're headed in the right direction in Washington, unfortunately, but but a lot of that's going to depend on what the quarterback is as a rookie, and is he capable of being, if he has an RG3 type rookie impact, that throws this whole division into chaos.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the Giants, and they have Daniel Jones at quarterback, and so it doesn't
Thankfully.
necessarily matter. Yeah, thankfully, we need them to win like 9 games this year, so they think he's good enough to keep. We
That
need
was
them to
that
do
year
that
too.
like every
What's his
couple of
name?
years.
The coach's first year. That was perfect. I was like,
Dayball,
that
yep.
we need just keep that. Just keep that
Exactly.
level.
Do that again so that you keep him, and then bottom out so they fire everybody, and then they have to start all the way over. Because I think Dayball's a good coach, and so
Yeah, he is.
if I can keep him attached to Daniel Jones, I will be thrilled. So that's the NFC East. Where do you think the Cowboys' 10 or 11 wins puts them by the time we get to the end of the year in terms of the NFC East?
I mean, I think it puts them toward the top. I
Yeah,
mean, every year we see that the NFC East is going to be closely contested as the season goes down to it. Right now, just based on rosters and based on, talent level, I think the Eagles are the ones that could vie with them the most. But as we talked about, the vibes between the head coach and the quarterback, especially, are not good, and that's something that can derail a season, or that's something that can cause a team that is expected to be very good to be but not very good. We've seen it so many times throughout football history. I would
oh
not be
yeah,
surprised if that happened. But as you said, they're the most talent dense team out, and maybe even including the Cowboys, if you take out the quarterback
yeah.
position, the most talent dense team in the entire division. So I, as of now, I expect them to be vying for the NFC East crown, especially because, I think it's going to be really hard to do that with rookie QBs. I'm one of those types that when you have a rookie quarterback, I'm kind of need to prove it to me type thing. I don't think you're going to
Hmm.
see the CJ Stroud effect on the Houston Texans for multiple reasons. One, I don't think these guys are as good as CJ Stroud, and two, I don't think that their coaches are as good as D'Amico Ryans and Bobby Slowick were for the Texans last year. I think that was just kind of like the perfect storm of things kind of coalescing together. But and one thing that not a lot of people are talking about that I think is going to be a huge difference is the loss of Jason Kelsey is going to be massive for that offensive line. We've seen basically every year since he kind of became that elite tier center, they've had an elite offensive line. And that's been with different tackles, that's been with different guards, that's been with the one constant has been Jason Kelsey, and that's because his ability to put people in position to succeed. He's so great with the line calls. I mean, there was just a quote that came out that Jalen Hurts didn't do anything pre-snap between line
The,
calls, protection
the,
stuff. That was all 100. And Hurts was mad that he didn't have any responsibility, but they had probably, and definitely in my lifetime, the best center I've ever watched.
yeah,
Man,
the what
man.
there's he's in the top probably 5 centers ever.
Mhm.
Probably, longevity included, all that other kind of stuff for sure.
Just fantastic guy. And losing out on that, we saw what happened to the Cowboys' offensive line when they lost Travis Frederick while still having Zach Martin and Tyron Smith on that offensive line. So I
Yep.
think you're definitely going to see, the Eagles' offensive line has been known as being probably the best in the NFL over the last decade. If you take an average of it, I think this year they're going to see a precipitous dip. I like Landon Dickerson, but I don't think he's going to come anywhere close to replacing what Jason Kelsey was for that offensive line. And then you move on to the Washington Commanders. I like the direction that they're going. I think they're headed in the right direction. But like I said, when you have a rookie quarterback, and especially one that's injury prone like Jaden Daniels, I think that's a really risky endeavor to be planning on them. They're a team that I could see like toward the end of the season, they could be playing. They could be a team causing fits for teams entering the playoffs. Like if you're in playoff contention, you don't want to see the Washington Commanders because I think they're one of those teams that when they get momentum, when they get a hot streak, when they're feeling good, those couple of games per year, they're going to be really, really tough to beat when they're firing on all cylinders. We know the guys on defense that they have, the Jonathan Allens, the Deron Paynes that have created issues for us for every year, but I still don't really trust that secondary. That second level of the defense, I don't think is that fantastic. And I think Quinn's style of defense, where he's not going to be using a lot of disguise and those type of things, isn't going to help him as much as whereas with the Cowboys, he had one of the most talented secondaries in the NFL.
Hmm.
And that really kind of helped him do what he wanted up front. So I'm not sure the Washington Commanders defense is going to see the same kind of jump that the Cowboys saw with Dan Quinn at the helm. And then the Giants, I think they're just a big mess. I really, really like Malik Neighbors. I really, really like Dexter Lawrence. But outside of that, it's not a ton that I really like on that team. Andrew Thomas, obviously, the left tackle is also really, really good. But with Daniel Jones as your starting quarterback, I'm not worried at all about them. I mean,
Right.
Dak Prescott
Exactly.
has owned the Giants since he entered
They've
the
had his
league.
Father's Day presents
He's going
every
to
year.
continue owning the Giants, I think, this year, and I think it's going to be. I think this honestly could be one of those years where you see the Cowboys have a 5-1, just six
Hmm.
and 0 record in the division. I think we match up well with everybody. I think, especially I think the Commanders are a team that could present some matchup problems, but I think Mike Zimmer, his defenses are so historically good against rookie quarterbacks that's something that's not going to, coalesce until maybe, year 2, 3, or 4 of Jaden Smith's career, or Jaden Daniels' career. Sorry.
Yeah, and the Cowboys have plenty of speed on the second and third levels of their defense that with the confusion that Zimmer is going to cause, Daniels is going to have to run for them to move the ball. And I think with the structure that the Cowboys defense is going to have this year versus prior years, I'm not as worried about the mobile quarterback scrambling thing as I have been in the past. Frederick brings up a great point. Stoutland is still in Philly, as far as I'm aware, at least.
Offensive line
and
coach.
He's fantastic offensive line coach. But here's the thing that John is talking about is for most of Jason Kelce's career, they've had a ton of young quarterbacks roll through there. Carson Wentz barely got to veteran status before he was out of there. They turned to Jalen Hurts, and basically, essentially, Jason Kelce has always had full responsibility for the line calls and the protections. So let's say they throw the ball 30 times in a game, or they call 30 pass plays in a game. They drop back that many times. If the protection call was perfect 29 out of 30 times before, and one of the problems with the Eagles offense for a long time had been they didn't have answers for pressure because they just counted on Jason Kelce to get the call right. Mm-hmm. If that call being correct, and Kellen Moore is not Mr. Hey, I'm going to not count on my quarterback and my offensive line to get stuff right on the field. He put a lot in Dak's hands too, put a lot in Justin Herbert's hands. He wants these guys to get things right at the line of scrimmage. If of those 30 dropbacks, now 25 of the protection calls are perfect, or 24 of the protection calls are perfect, even if they're still really well coached and the technique is really good, if the call isn't perfect and the disguise from a Mike Zimmer defense tricks a quarterback that's not used to making these calls, or tricks a young center who's not used to making these calls, now all of a sudden that's 3 or 4 drives that are essentially over as soon as you get a sack, force an income. And one of the things we've seen about Jalen Hurts is that if you force Jalen Hurts out of the pocket, he's going to run one direction and he's going to throw the ball away. He's not one of these guys. He's a very mobile quarterback, very good runner, but he's not one of these super creative out-of-the-pocket players that you can put pressure on him and he's going to scramble and make a big play. He's going to scramble, he's going to run, and if he can't get positive yardage running, he's going to throw the ball away, and it's essentially a wasted play. So if that number goes from 1% of the calls are wrong to 5 or 10% of the calls are not perfect, then that's a huge difference that Kelce was covering up that they are no longer going to have covered up.
And then add on to that, once you get the call right, it's about execution. And, Jason Kelce is going to execute, 29 out of 30 out of those 30 pass protections. What is Landon Dickerson going to do? Is he going to be at 27? Is he going to be at 28? Is he going to be at 26? Is it going to go down to 24? When you add in all these now layers where defenses could be more successful against the Eagles offense, it starts becoming a slippery slope, and it becomes kind of a high wire act for the Eagles offense to consistently not to find success, but to be consistent with the success that they find.
Yes, absolutely. And Alec, I did not hear this, but I'm not surprised, because if they believed that Hurts could run a conventional offense,
they would have ran
it. They would have put more conventional offensive concepts in their offense much sooner. Because the thing about Shane Steichen and the thing about Nick Sirianni and these guys come from and this is where the Kellen Moore connection comes, is these guys come from old school. They worked with Norv Turner in San Diego before they went to Indy with Frank Reich and were there with Phillip Rivers. And then that's what got them the job in Philadelphia. So these guys come from super traditional, conventional NFL backgrounds. They just have the ability to wrap some of this non-conventional stuff in. If they believed that Jalen Hurts could be that kind of a quarterback, they would have put that kind of an offense around him, because they have the talent everywhere else on their offense to run a super conventional offense. The offensive line has been really good. The wide receivers, everybody believes are really, I think, I included, believe they're really good. The tight end is good, and they now have a premier running back, if that exists. So I think you are right 100%. And Marcus, yes, the Eagles offense is essentially, RPOs, outside the numbers, deep balls, some slants, and then on 4th and 1 we're going to go for it every time. And so that's and the tush push thing is something that the Jason Kelce factor is going to be big in too. I think that we're not factoring in here yet is that aspect of, if that goes from being a 95% success rate play to a 50% success rate play, that Eagles offense all of a sudden just like
Craters.
Because so much of what made them so difficult to defend was they weren't on 1st and 10. They were on like 1st and 8.
Mm-hmm.
And then even if they went for 2 yards on 1st and 8, it was only 1st and 6 because they only had to get 6 yards and they had 3 plays to do it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Or they had 3 plays to get that 8 yards. So it was they just, and that kind of stuff is stuff that the Eagles organization does consistently, is they find those edges. And that's why a lot of people look at that organization as a model, is because of that. Is because they find those edges and those creases, and the tush push is one of those. We'll just have to see again if that's another cascading element of the Jason Kelce factor. Totally. John, I'm going to go right into your specialty here, right into your wheelhouse. Dak Prescott contract predictions. This is from our buddy Ross. Do you think it gets done this week? And then what are your numbers? Do you have numbers for us?
I hope it gets done this week.
Yeah.
And I hope it's around, what is it, 58 to 60 million per year. I think that really flexing my contract knowledge here. I think what came out this morning is that it's all about the length of the contract is really the sticking point. They've kind of agreed that he's going to get to, the highest paid quarterback in the NFL type money, whether that be, 58, 59 or $60 million per year. And they're just really worried, haggling over the length, and it seems like Dak wants a longer contract, or the Cowboys want a shorter contract, kind of the inverse of what their last contract negotiations were. So it's funny to see them on different sides there. I hope they come to an agreement, because if they don't come into an agreement this week, it's either going to be Cowboys are going to be backing up the dump truck of money, off season next year, or he's going to be gone. And I think you're one of the people who thinks he's going to be 100% gone, because I've heard you mention, the poison pill with the $40 million in dead money next year. And just the fact that Dak is going to be staring down the ability to go to free agency and make oodles of money and be on basically be put up at auction where teams are, vying for the highest bid. And who knows what, last time we saw what Deshaun Watson's contract went to when he was basically on the open market, and he was coming off, all that gross stuff that he was doing.
Teams were having to trade picks to get it too.
Exactly. He still got a fully guaranteed highest paid contract ever by a QB. So it's going to be crazy what a guy like Dak Prescott can do, who doesn't have the stuff in his, the skeletons in his closet, who has the consistent good play from each year. He didn't have to take off a year. He's still relatively young. He's obviously someone who does all the things necessary outside of the facility to get himself in shape. You don't have to put any, things in his contract that he won't play Call of Duty or anything like that.
Right.
So
yeah.
That dude's going to get a giant contract. So if they don't get it done by, Saturday, 11:59 p.m., I'm basically going to, my thought process is going to be, well, he's going to hit free agency next year, unless, I really don't see a reason why he wouldn't hit free agency next year if he makes it to Sunday without a contract.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the number probably winds up being between 58 and 60. Like you said, I kind of lean right in that 58 number, because that's a pretty significant bump up from where the top guys in the market are right now. Mm-hmm. But it also lets the Cowboys not be the first team to pay a $60 million a year contract and all that. Yeah. And you made the interesting point that the conversation about length is inverted from where it was before. And that's the difference between negotiating a contract with a 26-year-old player who knows that if I sign a 5-year contract or a 6-year contract, I'm 32 when I come off the back end of that contract, versus being 30, basically going into his 31-year-old season, which the thing that I don't think people realize is I think the next probably 3 to 4 years are probably going to be Dak's best years. Like they will
Mhm.
probably be the combination. We've heard lots of guys talk about this. Is that basically quarterback development is a race to try to get your mind caught up to the game before your body gives out.
Mhm.
Like while your body is still capable of playing at a high level, you want your mind to be caught up to it. And that is when you reach like quarterback utopia. And so
I mean,
like
that's what Brady would talk about the last few years. He said the last couple of years playing were the easiest years of
yes.
his career because it was just so easily mentally for him then.
Exactly.
It wasn't something that he was constantly processing. It was just constantly like, oh, see that, see that, see that, see that, seen that before, know what to do against that, know how to counter that. And it was just basically like playing like, like a little video game for him. And as long as his physical ability could carry out what his mind wanted him to do, you saw a ton of success. And when you started to see his body start to deteriorate and not be able to carry out with his mind, that's when, you get retired by Dak Prescott.
There you go. Exactly. And I think that like these quarterbacks, and we look at Dak as a quarterback and see what he was at Mississippi State, what he was early in his career here. He is not a run around, get hit a whole ton, hold on to the ball, get sacked. This is a guy whose game is going to age incredibly well. Like this guy is closer to that Peyton Manning, Tom Brady style of play that will age very well than it is to, a Mike Vick or somebody like that that gets beat up so bad that they can't play a long career. This guy's career, he's going to be able to play really well at 35, 38 if he wants to, all that kind of stuff. It's just really hard to get the very, very top of the market at 36 or 37, which is where he wants to be the next time he goes into free
And the
agency.
great thing about Dak Prescott is he doesn't have any upper body injuries. It's all
Right.
lower body, athleticism, running base. And those are things that he doesn't even really do much outside of the playoffs really anyways. So, especially
Exactly.
because we're talking regular season here, I don't think, his regular season play is going to be the same and or similar until the end of his career because, he's been so healthy from, the waist up.
Yeah, Marcus, this is a great point. Tony has talked about this, about how he felt like he got there in 2013, 2014, and then it just so happened that his body gave out on him. And he kind of knew it was coming, and the 2014 season ended, and that's why he felt kind of let down, is he felt like he had reached that level of quarterback play where his mind was where his body was, like where his mind and his body kind of met. And then, the body gave out starting in 2015 and all
Remember
that kind
that
of stuff.
one drive he had at the end of the season that they gave him, off the bench, hasn't played the entire year, and he put together easy touchdown drive, just boom, 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 boom. And that's
Touchdown.
where,
Yep.
a lot of the people that were saying that they should have kept Romo in after Dak Prescott obviously had that great run to start the season. You know, I am one of those people that believes that even though Dak Prescott was playing at such a high level and the team would have been better, I think, with Tony Romo at quarterback. I think he was the better QB. And I think that, especially in the playoffs, I think that would have been his best opportunity to take the Cowboys far in the playoffs. It's just the injury thing was the big issue. But I think if he was healthy, that would have been one of his best years. He was playing at such a high level before, even in the preseason and in camp before that injury. And then in the small glimpse we saw him afterwards, I really think
Yep.
that he was, that was going to be his kind of swan song, so to speak.
Yep. Absolutely. I think that I think there's a really good chance that this contract gets done in the next few days. I think if it doesn't, so what John was talking about with the poison pill is the Cowboys put void years on the end of Dak Prescott's contract. Um, we've talked about void years 900 times on this show. We don't have to go into super details on that. If you have questions about void years, you can ask them in the comments or ask me on Twitter. I'll answer them there. Basically, they put those void years out. When we reach the end of the 2024 league year, which is, call it March 12th, I don't know what the actual date is, of 2025. When that contract ends on the last day of the 2024 league year, $40 million of dead money from 3 or 4 years out will roll up into 1 year, and he will have a $40 million dead cap hit. even if he signs a new contract with the Cowboys in March after free agency, he signs a new contract with the Cowboys. That $40 million cap hit is there plus whatever is there for his new contract. If the Cowboys sign him to a contract before the end of the 2024 league year, then he only has about $23 million of that dead hit, and the rest of it is spread out over the next few years. So they essentially, it is a poison pill that will keep them. Even if they say, okay, Dak, go out to the market, see what contracts you get offered, and just do us the honor of giving us the right to match that contract. We'll match it word for word. They won't be able to match some of these contracts that some of these teams can offer them, because in order to do so, he will have to count $70 or $80 million against the Cowboys cap next year if they do that, because teams will be able to put so much cash and so much money in the first year of the contract that the Cowboys won't be able to match it. Just, I'm the guy who says the cap's not real because you can continue to do these things and kind of just roll things forward and push it forward and outrun it. If the Cowboys let this expire in March of next year, they will not be able to re-sign. They will not be able to sign Dak Prescott again. So if the contract doesn't get done now he's only 17 games from free agency. And he's 17 games in his prime. And he knows what's on the other side. He knows he will be the highest, the most accomplished quarterback at the youngest age to hit true free agency ever, I think. Because, you've seen Joe Montana, you've seen, and that wasn't even really free agency at that point in time. You've seen Peyton Manning, you've seen Brady, but those guys were like 40. Peyton Manning was coming off a spinal fusion surgery. Like, they were higher profile names than Dak Prescott is. But, like, in terms of, those were like 2 or 3 year opportunities. You could sign Dak Prescott next offseason, and you're looking at 8 years, a decade worth of high-level quarterback play coming because you sign him now. That this opportunity doesn't exist in free agency. And so the opportunity that Dak is going to have to get insane guaranteed money, like basically full of guarantee. Basically, if he hits free agency, every dollar he ever makes from now until the end of his career will be fully guaranteed. Like, I think it's relatively safe to say that. So the Cowboys really got to get this done in the next 3 or 4 days. They almost have to, even if that means, it'll be $60 million and it'll be 5 years. And now we're talking about the first $300 million contract in the history of the NFL, or the second, because I don't count Patrick Mahomes. His contract is different, but the first 5-year. $300 million contract in the NFL, the first $60 million APY contract in the NFL. If that's what it's got to do, then they've got 3 or 4 days. If that's what they've got to do to get it done, they've got to get it done, in my opinion, at least.
I need the Cowboys to save me from having to evaluate quarterbacks in the next draft classes. I do not want to have to go into next year, breaking down Shedeur Sanders tape. I don't want to have to take a look at the Beck kid from Georgia, or
I don't want to have to watch Quinn
Mason
Ewers,
Miller from USC or whatever this is. Connor Wigman, your squad.
I don't want to watch their wide receivers is what I don't want to have to watch. But yeah, Fred, you're absolutely right. The Raiders, the Giants, Miami just signed Tua. But I bet they'd find a way out of Tua if it meant that Dak Prescott came to Miami.
If Dak Prescott becomes available, you're not only going to see all the teams that need a quarterback be interested, you're going to see teams that already have a quarterback be still very interested in his services.
Peyton Manning was a free agent, and Matt Schaub was a Pro Bowl quarterback in Houston, and the Texans came in second in the running for The Broncos had Tim Tebow. That's a little bit of a different situation, but they were winning football games with Tim Tebow. they were, like they're, I would say half the teams in the league, at least probably, are looking around going, and most of those other half won't have quarterbacks better than Dak Prescott. They'll just have quarterbacks on rookie contracts that are so cheap that they'll just say, like, hey, maybe this guy will be Dak Prescott in 3 years and he's 1/60th of the cost. Let's just roll with what we've got. But you will see some teams that that will be in the Dak Prescott market that you would be shocked about for sure. All right, John, we've reached the hour mark. Thursday, we get to preview the Cleveland Browns for a regular season football game. I'm jacked up. I know you are jacked up. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. If you're watching on the replay, click subscribe, click like so you know when we're going live. Same thing if you're watching live. Click the like button, the subscribe button, leave a comment, all the YouTube stuff you guys know how to do. If you're a business owner and you've got accounting problems, let me tell you a secret, they're not going to go away. They are not going to go away for 2024. If you filed an extension for your 2023 taxes because you have 2023 accounting problems, that deadline is like 45 days away, 42 days away. They're not going away. Call me, send me a DM, reach out to me on Twitter. I can make those problems go away a lot faster than you ignoring them can. And they're only getting bigger and more expensive the longer you wait. So reach out to us, Silvermoon Financial. That's my company. We'll take good care of you. Guys, we will see you on Thursday. John, thanks so much, man.
Adios.